analyze the baits, analyze why they're good, why they're not good, why sometimes one bait works over another bait. And then, when I started out, the first baits that I designed were for the Spro Corporation. And then in the past 2 years, 3 years really, I've been designing baits for Missile Baits, which is a company I started. And it kind of got me reflecting on something that I thought about kind of afterward. And I said, you know what? When Billy was asking me about what am I going to talk about, I said, you know what? A lot of people don't know their tools as well as they should. And what I mean by that is they don't know the baits that they're fishing. They really don't know them that well. They don't know what they're supposed to be used for. They don't know what they can do, what they can't do. They don't know all the different applications that a particular bait can do. And so what I'm going to do is I picked out 2 baits that I fish a lot. And I would say that, out of the 2 separate categories, they're probably the 2 baits that are the most underrated, undiscovered, however you want to put it. It's the 2 baits that people probably know the least about. And a friend of mine put it real well. Is that when I started Missile Baits, we started with 5 different shapes, and I gave him some of each one of them to try out. And he told me about a year later, he said, it took me almost a year before I threw that missile crawl, because he just didn't know what it would be used for, didn't know how to use it. Now that he's gotten to where he fishes that bait a lot, he says he fishes it more than probably any of the other baits, even more than the D-Bomb and some of the more popular baits, now that he understands that bait and how to use it. And so that's kind of what I want to try to take 2 baits, and then you can kind of take the way that I've dissected these 2 baits, and whatever baits that you like to fish. And then as you start acquiring new baits into your arsenal, you can kind of figure out a way to analyze that bait and how you can better utilize it. And I think that can definitely make you a lot better fisherman, a lot better angler, is that if you analyze your baits, kind of one at a time, what they're good at, what they're not good at, why, you'll make you a lot better angler. You'll know your tools. You'll know that when you come up and you say, man, I need a bait that skips under that dock really well. You've already tested it. There's some baits that skip better than others, just by their nature. And if you've already kind of tested them and know what the baits can and can't do, you're not going to try to stick a round hole in a square peg in a round hole. You're not going to try to do it because you already understand what they're good for. So, and then the other thing about having one bait and knowing it well is the vibration. All these crankbaits are made in machines, but they're not all exactly the same. And when something's not exactly the same, you really have to know it in order to know if one's the same or if it's different. And years ago, I thought this was kind of funny that a friend of mine fished with David Fritz, and at the end of the day, he said, that was an experience. I said, what was the biggest thing you learned? He said, by the end of the day, he had about 6 or 7 crankbaits piled up in the floor, and they were all the same. And he said I could take them because they weren't any good. And I said, what do you mean? He said, he had the bait on that he wanted to start with. He caught a couple fish on it, and then he got it hung up and broke it off. And then so he got another bait out of the box, tied it on, started fishing it, and made about 10 casts with it. And he said, that one's not right. And he cut the bait off. And he chopped it in the floor, and he put another one on. And then he ended up going through about 6 or 7 baits until he found one that he liked. That he said it ran right. And he said, what do you mean? He said, I can't explain it. I just know the feel. And what he meant by that is that bait that he was throwing was a bait that he knew really, really well. And he knew what that bait was supposed to feel like. He knew what that bait was supposed to feel like when it was coming through the water. And some things you can't explain it. You just say, what didn't feel right? I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. And there was something different about those baits that he didn't like until he found another one that had just the right action. And since he's told me about that, the only way, it didn't dawn on me until later on, until I started really getting to know one bait. Like I'm talking about, this is called Know Your Tools. I really didn't know what he was talking about, and then it kind of the light bulb went off when, especially with like a Little John DD. It's the same way. I've got baits that I'll cut off and I'll put like a little special mark on them because those are special. They run, for some reason, they just run just right. The Fat John's kind of the same way. It actually has surprised me that a production bait that has that hunting action, they've got them to where they're pretty darn consistent. I would say it's 3 or 4, probably 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5, something like that, run the way they're supposed to. So there's very few that I'll be cutting off and dropping on the floor and say they don't work. There's very few of those. So out of the ones out of the room, I mean, there may be 2 or 3, 4 maybe that don't run as good as some of the other ones. But even those ones that don't run as well, I still fish those ones in practice because I feel like I want to hold my best baits for the tournament when it counts. But they'll still, so they'll still bite the other ones. But once you really get to know that crankbait, you'll understand what that means, and you'll know when you get one of those Fat Johns, it's just right as you're reeling it, and it really has that wild kick, and it still has that hard thump. You'll know that's the right one, and the fish that you catch on it will show you as well.
Hey, I'm Pete Gluzek.
And I'm Mike Iaconelli.
And this is Bass University TV.
Welcome to Bass University TV, an online video training course where you'll learn champion bass fishing techniques from pro anglers Pete Gluzek, Mike Iaconelli, and their talented special guests.
Everywhere I go in the country, I'm trying to use these techniques because I catch big fish that way.
From on the water to in the classroom.
We want to use that bait to help make that area even smaller and really, really find that sweet spot.
You'll learn sound techniques and strong fundamental bass fishing skills.
You want something that's got a nice limber action, that's going to allow you to build pressure and keep those hooks pinned against that fish's mouth.
Watch hours of video content on multiple topics at your own pace for a low monthly fee. Cancel at any time.
Hold on, because you're going to catch some big fish.
Information is power in the sport of fishing, so learn from the very best.
That's a key theory in all of fishing.
Subscribe to Bass University TV today.
Man, does it trigger a lot of strikes.
Here's the part that you're not going to hear anywhere else. This is the Bass University TV exclusive.